Hello. This assembly was given to the students at Pride Park College on the morning of Friday the 15th of January 2026. Last weekend I watched an old movie. It was made in 1997 and it's called Air Force One. It stars Harrison Ford, Han Solo from Star Wars and also Indiana Jones as the President of the USA. The opening chunk of this film is very exciting. An elite team of US Special Forces storm a presidential palace in a hostile foreign country. They seize an enemy head of state from his bed in the middle of the night to face American justice. Until a few weeks ago, this was just a movie. It's a great movie and it's lots of fun, but it was just a movie. A few weeks ago though, the real-life president of the USA, Donald Trump, launched an operation that made the start of this Hollywood blockbuster into a reality. On the 3rd of January, the United States launched a military strike on the South American country of Venezuela. They bombed crucial sites in the country and conducted a raid on the presidential palace. Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, was captured and he was flown by helicopter to a US warship off the coast. Within hours, he was flown to New York and is now awaiting trial in a US court. President Trump took the far-fetched plot of a film and made it into a reality. Now, this should probably not come as a surprise. When he was running for the presidency, back in 2016, Donald Trump stated that he admired the film Air Force One because the fictional president played by Harrison Ford, in Trump's words, stood up for America. On the night that Trump won election as president in 2016, he played the theme music from the movie before his first speech in that ballroom. President Trump first gained a global profile as the main character on the reality TV show, The Apprentice. He comes from the world of media and entertainment. He was, before he became a politician, an entertainer. It isn't a shock then that some of the decisions that he takes as a political leader are decisions which seem to come from the world of entertainment, from movies, from TV shows, even from video games. America invaded a country, seized its president, and within a few hours had posted videos on social media boasting about it. If you know, you know. It was a flex, and it was an impressive one in terms of showing just how powerful America and Donald Trump are. This sort of action is one that shook a lot of people around the world. Russia accused the US of committing an act of armed aggression. China said that it was deeply shocked, and Iran complained that America's actions were a violation of Venezuela's national sovereignty. All three of these countries, which are very much not friends of the USA and were allies of former President Maduro, they seem pretty worried about what President Trump will do next. Let's be clear. Nicolas Maduro, the captured Venezuelan leader, is not a nice guy. He held on to power in Venezuela despite having lost an election. He has been accused by America of running an international drug smuggling organisation, and the USA have made it very clear that for them, Mr. Maduro is a terrorist. The UK's own Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, said that we regarded Maduro as an illegitimate president and we shed no tears about the end of his regime. So Donald Trump and the USA have overthrown a dictator of a Latin American country. They've captured him, they've imprisoned him, and they will put him on trial. He will almost certainly spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Some countries are unhappy about this. And one of the key questions being asked, and one of the key questions we need to ask is, were the USA right to have done this? Should they have acted in such a dominant, gung-ho way? when faced with difficult international problems, countries can choose to act in one of two ways. They can act unilaterally or multilaterally. Unilateralism is when a country acts alone, like the USA has done in Venezuela. Multilateralism is when more than one country gets together to solve big, complicated issues. Now, many people are worried that the USA has been acting more unilaterally under President Trump than it ever has before. Acting on their own, doing what they think is right, rather than what the wider world community thinks is right. President Trump is undoubtedly an abrasive figure. He is certainly acting in what he thinks is America's self-interest, and he makes no apologies for that. He's not really concerned with what other countries think. He has adopted a policy of America first, and he puts the interests of the United States above the interests of any and all other nations and people. Now, I was born in 1981, and so I can just about remember the Cold War. The Cold War was a division between Russia on one side and the US and its allies, like Britain, on the other. It started in the 1940s and it lasted until I was about 10. It was a war between two ideas, two ways of ruling, communism on the one hand and capitalism on the other. Both sides in this war had loads of nuclear weapons pointed at each other. And everyone knew this, and it was genuinely quite scary. I distinctly remember having vivid nightmares as a child. I dreamed of the whole world being destroyed. It was terrifying. I'd proper wake in the middle of the night screaming nightmares. It didn't happen, obviously. I'm still here, as are we all. And the Cold War ended. And for the next 20 years or so, the world felt a much safer place. It felt as if countries were cooperating a little more, that multilateralism we spoke about earlier, and that we were fairly far away from the end of the world. Now, there's an interesting group called the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. It was founded by Albert Einstein, along with Robert J. Oppenheimer and the other scientists who developed the first atomic weapons back during the Second World War. They have a metaphorical image called the Doomsday Clock, and every year they release a statement with a time. The closer that time is to midnight, then the closer they think the world is to ending in a nuclear apocalypse. At the end of the Cold War, back in 1991, the hands of the Doomsday Clock were set at 17 minutes to midnight, which is the furthest from midnight that they have been since this really quite scary clock started metaphorically ticking back in 1947. Over the past 15 years, though, that clock has been ticking down. In 2012, it was 5 minutes to midnight. 2015, 3 minutes. 2018, 2 minutes. 2020, 100 seconds. 2023, 90 seconds. 2025, 89 seconds. According to this group, our world is now about the most dangerous it has ever been. So, should you all be waking up in the middle of the night and screaming like 8-year-old me? Should we all be worried about the state of the world? Well, yes. However, I genuinely think that trying to understand the motivations of global powers and global leaders might help us a little in lessening all our fears. There are several organisations which exist to help countries cooperate. The United Nations, the UN, the European Union, the EU and NATO. The last of these, NATO, stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation. It's an international organisation which brings together the militaries of 32 different countries, including Britain and the United States. NATO agree that if one member country is attacked, all the other countries in that alliance will come to help them. NATO has helped many in the Western world feel safe for decades. However, it is certainly under threat at the moment. Russia is throwing its weight around. And, as we all know, it has invaded Ukraine, which is not a member of NATO. However, NATO countries do share a border with Russia, and some of them are very scared indeed. As a result, they've started spending a lot more money on defence. All NATO members should spend about 2% of their gross domestic product on NATO. The UK spends 2.33% on NATO last year, which is an increase of 23% on a decade ago. Poland, though, spent over 4% of its GDP on NATO, which is an increase of 214% on 10 years back. Fear of countries acting unilaterally, like Russia did by invading Ukraine, is leading to more money being spent on weapons. So the question is, does spending more on weapons make the world a safer place? Well, it goes back to those ideas of unilateralism and multilateralism. The world, logic dictates, would be a safer place if there were no guns, no tanks, no bombs. However, if one country had all the guns, all the tanks, and all the bombs, then they'd be able to make every other country do what they wanted. So that's why countries like Britain are members of multilateral organisations like NATO. These aren't aggressive organisations. They are organisations designed to make the world safer. And they do that by making sure that as a whole, they are too strong to attack. It makes a strange sort of sense then that as that doomsday clock ticks ever closer to midnight, we spend more on defence. If we spend more on weapons, then we actually decrease the likelihood that we might ever have to use them. That's certainly the theory. NATO itself is under threat, though, from President Trump. He said that the USA should take over Greenland, which is a part of the Kingdom of Denmark, which is another member of NATO. NATO states aren't meant to attack each other. They are meant to work together. However, the USA is the largest NATO state, and as it's shown in Venezuela in the last few weeks, it is incredibly powerful. In truth, if it wanted to seize Greenland, it could. However, that would be another unilateral action. The other 31 members of NATO must convince the USA that NATO is in the USA's self-interest and that multilateralism is the way to operate. We know that President Trump is operating on that principle of America first. So it is the job of everyone else in NATO to show him and to show the USA that we are bearing the burden of our own defence and the defence of America. We are stronger together as long as we are actually all together. Democratic, free countries have to stick together. It's the only thing that will save them from being attacked by all of those more dangerous nations that we know are out there. So after the action in Venezuela, President Trump was asked whether there were any limits to his global powers. He said, yeah, there's one thing, my own morality, my own mind. It's the only thing that can stop me. I don't need international law. I'm not looking to hurt people. Trump went on to say that he did need to follow international law, but he then finished by saying it depends upon what your definition of international law is. So this is worrying, and it might point to a slightly bigger issue. The idea of the rule of law has been eroded by the USA's recent actions. Laws in the Western world have overwhelmingly come from the laws of the religion that sits at the core of the nations that wrote those laws, Christianity. Christian teachings underpin the essentials of the laws that society functions on. The idea that the first shall be last, or that the weakest in societies need protection. These are Christian teachings. The Roman Empire that preceded Christianity was not like this. It celebrated strength, military might, and aggression. One famous Roman historian, Tacitus, said that the Romans make a desert and call it peace. Power was at Rome's core. Nothing else mattered. Power is not how Christian nation states have tried or tended to operate. There have always been moral missions underpinning the actions, or at least, the very least, the pretense of a moral mission. Wars were presented as being for a moral purpose. President Trump is basing his decisions apparently only on his own morality, rather than the Christian morality that has underpinned America's actions up to this point. We might need to be a little bit more concerned if that's the case. If, though, President Trump is doing what he is doing to protect the weak within Venezuela, or indeed protect the weak within Greenland, then we might see that we'd be facing a happier, calmer, and a more peaceful world. Maybe that doomsday clock will tick further away from destruction. I do hope so. Rather than a prayer, I thought I would finish today's assembly with a poem which reads a little bit like a prayer. It's by the English poet John Donne, and is focused on the essential truth that our individual existence relies on the fact that humanity is a collective and that we are all equally vulnerable. No man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friend, or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great weekend. Goodbye.